I'm Elaine Reyes with a special edition of America's Now. Tonight, death at the racetrack. America's Now investigative correspondent Mike Kirsh opens the gates on the U.S. horse racing industry, taking us behind the stable doors to where American racehorses are being saddled with a lot more than just a harness. Performance-enhancing practices and the price being paid to make a profit.
If you've got an injured horse, the horse should be turned out and given time off. He shouldn't be given medication to mask his discomfort from himself. People can't watch races now because they're afraid they're going to see an accident.
It's hard to keep up with the many scandals in the sporting world, especially with headlines over doping or the use of illegal medications and performance-enhancing drugs to give athletes an edge. In the United States, there is a disturbing pattern of steroid use in Major League Baseball. And more recently, it was the dramatic fall of American Tour de France cyclist Lance Armstrong that dominated the news. Some say perhaps more explosive than doping in human sports is what's happening in the world of horse racing in America, where animals have no say in the matter. Horses are being illegally drugged on a staggering scale before races, pushed to the limits and dying by the dozens. America's Now correspondent Mike Kirsh spent the last 3 months following the horse racing circuit in Southern California, gaining extraordinary access to racing insiders. He files this report.
It was back in 1972 in Del Mar, California, at Del Mar Racetrack, when at the age of 9 I picked my first winning racehorse, a long shot that paid my dad $800. Today, 40 years later, I'm back. Full disclosure, it's still a thrill watching the horses run. The pageantry of it on full display this past July on opening day of the Del Mar racing season. 6 weeks of horses thundering down the home stretch where the surf meets the turf. More than 40,000 people showed up. Horse racing fans Gary Robertson and Jeff Matney had been the first guys in the parking lot 4 hours before race time on opening day.
You're gonna win some big money today.
Big money today.
Big money. Big
5 races.
Yep.
Horse racing at Del Mar with the big thoroughbreds and the cute women. Yeah, hats and sundresses today.
Del Mar racing officials granted me unbridled access behind the scenes at a particularly sensitive time, as the American horse racing industry faces a major public relations crisis fueled by allegations of widespread doping and abuse of racehorses. Some say a scandal bigger than the human doping scandals of American Tour de France cyclist Lance Armstrong and Major League Baseball combined. That's because horse racing fans wager $10 billion a year on the sport. 4 times the amount of money bet on every other professional sport in America combined. Increasing numbers of fans are questioning the integrity of horse racing. Once exalted as the sport of kings, in whose regal hands it all began, insiders say today it's becoming better recognized as the sport of cheats.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying, is what I've heard.
Where the game is fixed by humans drugging horses to win. America's Now spent 3 months at racetracks in Southern California, considered the most competitive horse racing circuit in the world.
When to go, have them ready. Just be careful.
Witnessing what most fans don't. Up close and personal.
All right, guys, very good. That was a bad bunch there.
Listening to the chatter of insiders rarely heard in public.
On a Wednesday on the last race.
Many talking about the man who runs Team O'Neill, America's superstar horse trainer Doug O'Neill, winner earlier this year of America's most celebrated horse race, the Kentucky Derby, with I'll Have Another. O'Neill is a glaring no-show this year at Del Mar. Not in his office, nowhere to be found. suspended from horse racing. His assistant trainers and crew overseeing dozens of horses O'Neill races for various owners.
Love you, Doug. Definitely grab that, and then I'm gonna...
Doug O'Neill was 100 miles north of Del Mar, serving out a 45-day suspension at his home in Santa Monica, California.
Well, if I get a trench coat and a fake mustache, you might see me.
He's serving a suspension handed down by the California Horse Racing Board, the industry's governing body here in California, after one of the dozens of horses O'Neill trains for various owners was found to have high levels of total carbon dioxide, or TCO2, setting off rumors that O'Neill may have milkshaked the horse. Milkshaking, as you're about to see in these images obtained from an anonymous horse racing insider, is a simple and quick way of giving a horse more stamina. By mixing together an easily available kitchen cabinet concoction of sodium bicarbonate, or baking soda, and sugar with water and electrolytes, that's shot up through a long tube inserted through a horse's nostril straight down into its stomach. Milkshaking is said to relieve muscle cramping and fatigue. It artificially manipulates the total carbon dioxide, or TCO2 levels of a racehorse, enabling it ultimately to run better, giving it an advantage over other, more fatigued horses in a race. And in short, say O'Neill's critics and accusers, it's what's known as cheating.
Have you ever cheated, Doug?
No.
O'Neill says he's never milkshaked a horse. He says high TCO2 levels can come from the hay a horse eats or from a number of things beyond a trainer's control. And in fact, in O'Neill's case, a hearing officer said there was no proof or evidence of milkshaking, only that the TCO2 levels in his horse were too high, though O'Neill, as the trainer under California horse racing rules, is responsible for that, regardless of how it happened. That it's O'Neill's third such violation in California, along with a fourth in another state, concerns the California Horse Racing Board's equine medical director, Dr. Rick Arthur, who's considered the state's top horse racing authority tasked with catching drug cheats.
Do you sort of strike the fear in people when they see you showing up on the scene, if it's you?
No, well, certainly if I show up unexpectedly, you know, they usually know it's bad news, but...
Arthur says O'Neill, pure and simple, broke the rules.
This, by the way, was his fourth TCO2 violation. It's not like it was the first time.
Dr. Arthur has something personally against me, and, you know, our success, for whatever reason, I think he sees it as being something that we must have a magic pill.
I consider Doug O'Neill a personal failure, simply because he had a TCO2 violation, and I spent time talking to Doug, and he didn't understand it.
He says, I view Doug O'Neill as a personal failure.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, you never want to get in a fight with a skunk, whatever that cliche is. And
you have to wonder whether a person is a slow learner or not.
Doug O'Neill.
O'Neill says he believes some in horse racing are out to get him out of jealousy.
I'll have another!
After his winning the Kentucky Derby this year with I'll Have Another.
I'll have another! I've won the Kentucky Derby! Woo!
Unbelievable.
Wow!
I can watch that a million times.
O'Neill also won the Preakness Stakes this year with I'll Have Another, and was favored to win the Belmont Stakes to capture the first Triple Crown since affirmed in 1978. But he scratched I'll Have Another on the eve of the race, claiming it suffered a freakish injury to its left front tendon. Drawing suspicion, however, when veterinarian records later indicated that I'll Have Another had been suffering from osteoarthritis for some time. Some have accused O'Neill of scratching I'll Have Another ultimately after the horse was put under lock and key in a detention barn before the race with other horses as a precaution against possible tampering.
You heard claims along the lines that, well, I'll Have Another's going to be in a detention barn so they can't get at the horse to juice the horse, dope the horse, so they pulled the horse.
Yeah, that was just ridiculous.
Be that as it may, O'Neill has gone from American horse racing's golden boy to a guy many competitors now call a drug cheat, saddled with an unflattering nickname that rhymes with Doug.
Drug O'Neill.
To his kids, to daughter Caleb and son Daniel, he's dad, who's been suspended.
our dad's suspended. So.
What does that mean? Like when you hear your daughter say that, my dad's suspended?
I know, that definitely.
He's fired.
Yeah, that is.
It's only for 40 days.
Yeah.
You've won the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness.
Yeah, well, you know, and we've talked about a lot of what's gone on at home as a family, and so they know the truth and my side of it. And
the truth, says O'Neill, is that he's been made a fall guy by the American horse racing industry to quell its erupting public relations nightmare.
Racing at the quarter pole, the real story has made a big run on the inside. Oh, going down with Snowcap, we've had a spill.
Particularly from a New York Times investigation revealing how widespread horse doping in the industry, pushing horses to their limits, has led many of them to break down and die on tracks across the country, as many as 24 horses dying a week after suffering catastrophic race injuries.
4 years ago, 8 Bells finished second at the Derby and then broke 2 ankles. She was euthanized on the track.
What is going on here?
Congress held hearings.
What is happening to the sport of kings?
The Times reporting that many horses suffer from illnesses or ailments linked to illegal substances in their systems, from steroids to dermorphin, obtained from frog secretions, to cobra venom. And, as America's now discovered, there is the controversial use of legal medications such as Lasix. It's what the American horse racing industry calls a permissive therapeutic medication, administered in full view here in the barn at Del Mar to most horses before they race.
Lasix, yeah. Lasix is an injection. It's a diuretic. So
what does that do?
It helps decrease the mean arterial blood pressure, makes it less likely for them to bleed while running, bleed from their lungs, which would decrease performance.
How standard is it racing?
Very standard.
Lasix is said to be injected into upwards of 90% of American racehorses on race day to stop bleeding in the lungs. Lasix, a standard race day medication in America, is banned worldwide under international horse racing regulations that ban medication or drugs of any kind for racing. Zero tolerance for racing medications in Asia and Europe, not in the United States. Medications like Lasix permitted under American horse racing's own set of regulations. Most American trainers use Lasix, including Doug O'Neill, as observed in his barn behind the track at Del Mar, where at least 3 of his horses were injected by a veterinarian 4 hours prior to their races. In a rather stunning admission, O'Neill says therapeutic medications like Lasix may not always be in the best interest of a horse.
You know, I've been guilty of pushing the lines with therapeutic medications. I've been guilty of running horses maybe too often, and you know, I've had horses get hurt, I've had horses break down, and you know, you have investors that are investing a lot of money, are paying a lot of bills, and they want to see them compete. You know, none of us should run them unless they're 100%, and I've definitely been guilty of you know, maybe trying to run them when they weren't.
O'Neill claims he's not the only trainer who pushes the envelope with permissive medications, and accuses the state's chief doping investigator, Dr. Rick Arthur, of coming down hard on him to make it appear California is cleaning up the sport. Arthur denies that claim.
Everybody is treated the same. It doesn't matter whether it's Doug O'Neill or anyone else. They're all treated the same. It's all about a deterrent. And what we want are trainers to play by the rules. They play by the rules, they're going to be fine. If they don't play by the rules, they're going to be in trouble.
Dr. Arthur claims the state's crackdown on illegal doping has been a success.
Doping instances are few and far between.
Not so, says this racing insider, a self-described career doper, his identity concealed and his voice modified to avoid detection, who claims he's drugged horses for races at Del Mar, Santa Anita Racetrack, and Hollywood Park.
I've done it myself so many times, and I've seen top trainers or their help do it.
And you've milkshaked at all these places?
Yes.
You're proud of that?
No, I'm not.
He says milkshaking is just one of many ways trainers are cheating and winning races over their competitors.
And in order for you to keep up with the Joneses, you have to cheat.
His access to California racetracks has been independently confirmed by other racing insiders. He also holds a valid California Horse Racing Board issued license, mandatory for those working with horses at California's racetracks. He says milkshaking and other illegal methods to dope a horse are often as quick to do as injecting legal medications like Lasix.
It only takes a few seconds. It doesn't take that long.
Eluding track security personnel, he says, is just a matter of timing.
No more. Hey, come on.
As confirmed by these two nice security ladies monitoring horses before a stakes race at Del Mar.
What they do at midnight and early in the morning, we have no way of detecting that, but they can find out by drug urine tests and stuff off the horses.
Or can they? He says the state drug testing of Dr. Rick Arthur, while state-of-the-art, has been foiled by cheaters who do their own private testing on horses to stay below detectable threshold levels.
There are so many doing their own testing. Everybody knows the threshold. They know how much to give. There's no way you can stop a cheater.
You have Dr. Rick Arthur of the state of California, the California Horse Racing Board, saying that
doping instances are few and far between.
It is happening. He's just saying that because he has to protect his image. And I believe that's why Doug O'Neill became the scapegoat for California.
A fall guy?
A fall guy, yes. If they're after somebody, they are going to get them.
You can lift up Leo? Wow.
Dr. Arthur says that's impossible because the names of trainers are not on the blood and urine samples routinely drawn from winning horses in each race that go to the state lab for testing.
Those samples that we draw from horses, whether it's a blood sample or urine sample, go into the laboratory as coded numbers. The laboratory has no idea who they are. They're reported out as coded numbers. So nobody has any idea what those samples are when they're analyzed in the laboratory. The person who decodes them is in Sacramento. It's not me.
Arthur says the fact remains Doug O'Neill has now had 4 TCO2 violations that have led many industry insiders to question whether he's cheating.
Uh-oh. This is loud.
I asked this individual to comment on O'Neill's repeated TCO2 violations.
I asked him point blank, have you cheated, Doug?
Have you ever cheated, Doug?
No.
And he said no.
Of course they're going to tell you no. A trainer needs to make sure he's got his reputation, and they're not going to admit they cheated.
It's amazing.
You might have some people watching this saying, well, Doug O'Neill's playing the family guy now, trying to make himself look good. And how do you respond to something like that?
You know, I respect everyone, and you know, I don't necessarily have to agree with everyone, but I respect everyone, and you know, I think for someone to say that they wouldn't know me, and you know, am I the perfect family guy? No, but
yes, he is.
Do I love my family? Yes, and
no, you don't.
And I don't know who that kid is, but it's definitely not my kid. I'll tell him about being adopted later. It's a long story.
As for his own story, O'Neill says claims that he's a cheater are just claims, and he challenges anyone, for example, guys like this, to prove it.
What do you say to your critics out there watching this saying, we don't know who this guy is, he could be making all this up. Why is he coming forward now if he's been doing it for so many years?
Everybody in this industry knows what I'm talking about. My question to them is, why haven't they come out and done this on national TV? Are they afraid? Because we're all afraid in this industry. We don't want to show our faces. You don't want to be a whistleblower, because we might not ever get a job in our industry. It's a tough industry.
Indeed, many people in horse racing circles seem reluctant to speak publicly about the issue of doping.
For example, one respected private practice equine veterinarian in Southern California, Dr. M.J. Martinelli, who works with injured racehorses, declined to discuss whether the horse racing industry is being straight with the public about their treatment.
Are we hearing the straight scoop from the industry when it comes to the overall well-being of the horses?
The doctor later said he has racing clients and would rather not comment. At Hollywood Park, veteran equine massage therapist Gail Matthews says she's paid the price for merely suggesting to some trainers that their horses were too injured to race.
Oh, I've lost clients. I've lost big clients because of my opinions. If you've got an injured horse, the horse should be turned out and given time off. He shouldn't be given medication to mask his discomfort from himself. It's just too much risk-taking with the lives of the horses. People can't watch races now because they're afraid they're going to see an accident.
And many horse deaths often go unnoticed. What most racing fans at Del Mar's summer meet may not be aware of is that out of their view, 11 racehorses died in just 6 weeks here, euthanized in barns behind the track, put down because of injury or illnesses suffered while racing. Racing officials here call that pretty standard.
Tough job.
Racing fan and horse lover Karen GROBLI calls it appalling.
I think people, especially Del Mar meet, is such a happy summertime, family meet. And I think most of those people that go and enjoy a weekend there have no idea what happens to most of these guys.
GROBLI heads a nonprofit rehabilitation farm on the California-Mexico border called Tijuana River Valley Animal Rescue.
I became heavily involved in rescue in about 2004.
Rescuing horses, GROBLI says, from career-ending injuries and often, like this one, abandonment. Each year in North America, roughly 37,000 racing thoroughbreds are born and registered with tattoos under their lips to track them. And of those, 10% of them, or 1.5 per thousand, almost 2 a day, will suffer career-ending breakdowns like this one that was abandoned by his owner. And there are stories of abuse that go beyond the doping and over-racing of horses, says former horse racing physical therapist PRISCILLA Clark.
I saw a horse being severely beaten and loaded into a trailer in a very rough manner, and when I inquired why the person was abusing the horse, I was told the horse was just going to the feedlot, just going to the auction for slaughter.
The fate of thousands of retired or abandoned racehorses are slaughterhouses in Canada and Mexico. You might want to turn away at this point if horses being shot bothers you. The animals killed, their meat processed for pet food and human consumption in Europe and Asia.
Clark operates a nonprofit horse rescue and adoption facility called Tranquility Farms here in Tehachapi, California, for racehorses abandoned by their owners, some after making them millionaires. Owners who, if they don't find homes for their horses themselves, are not obligated under law to pay for or provide sponsorship for their horse's retirement.
I had a horse here, I just adopted him out. He actually went to a home this year. He made $1,250,000. And we took him out here at the farm. I called the former owner and asked if I could get a sponsorship. And he told me, well, my wife has other charities. So we didn't get a dime for the horse. We didn't get a dime from the former owner that had made the $1 million with him. Yeah.
Clark says owners that can afford the $30,000 a year it takes on average to house, feed, and train a racehorse should be made to put up at least a 10% bond or $3,000 for a horse's retirement and or retraining for adoption. For the moment, life after racing has been overshadowed by the doping or medication of horses that is dominating the headlines. Noted equine veterinarian Dr. SHEILA LYONS herself making news when she testified recently before the U.S. Congress in support of legislation banning all drugs and medications, including Lasix, in the sport of American horse racing.
I think that unless we can insist on the highest level of integrity, not only for safety, but for a clean sport also for the bettors, then I think horse racing should go the way that dog racing has gone. And that is that the people have gone to their state ballots and they've made it illegal in various states.
Earlier this month at Santa Anita, the industry held its Super Bowl or World Cup of horse racing, the Breeders' Cup Championship.
There you go, Doug O'Neill.
Trainer Doug O'Neill returned to racing after serving his 45-day suspension. O'Neill did well. One of his horses, He's Had Enough, a long shot, finished a strong second. And there's some talk O'Neill could be headed back to the Kentucky Derby. Going all but unnoticed amidst the fanfare here was the swan song of California veterinarian Dr. Jill Bailey. After 5 years as a state horse racing vet, this will be her last event. So bothered, she says, by the current state of horse racing, she's resigning. In large part, she says, because of what she calls the incestuous protective nature of the industry, where board members who make the rules also own racehorses, trained to win by the very trainers they're supposed to be policing. Many accusing California Horse Racing Board members of letting favored trainers off with only warnings or ignoring drug violations altogether.
One trainer in particular said, you know, it's kind of like you live in a small town and you know there's a serial killer. And so to help with that, you write parking tickets.
In their defense, Horse Racing Board members say the present rules, including those allowing them to own horses, can only be struck down or changed by California's governor, in this case, Governor Jerry Brown and the state legislature. It remains unclear what plans Brown may have to change the status quo of racing in California. If American horse racing is to survive, says legendary horse trainer Bruce Headley, drugs and drug cheats, he says, must be banned from the sport.
And that's Billy Shoemaker. That's before they had strapes or vests. And that's me in the overcoat. I was 19 years old right then.
Respected across the U.S. as a master horseman, a trainer and owner of 50 horses, Bruce Headley has won nearly 1,000 races, becoming a millionaire in a career that spans 50 years.
This is the Breeders' Cup, a sprint, in the year 2000 with Kona Gold. And he ran the fastest 6 furlongs in Churchill history, 107.7.
A horse he claims he trained like all of his others, with hay, oats, and water.
Drugs? No drugs, not even a vitamin shot.
Headley concedes his champion Kona Gold did receive a permissible Lasix injection before the Breeders' Cup race to stop bleeding in the lungs. Since then, Headley says he's had fewer wins against more and more horses he believes have been tampered with or doped.
We're just going to keep going and keep trying to outrun their asses.
Headley says few in the horse racing game with millions of dollars at stake can claim to be squeaky clean. He himself was sued in a widely publicized horse trading scandal a few years back and penalized in the 90s over the use of the decongestant clenbuterol in his horses, which has been found to build muscle mass in horses when used in large quantities. Nobody, he says, in horse racing is perfect.
Nobody's perfect. Nope, can't be. If the thoughts of men were thought of sometimes what they think, all of us would be shot or put in jail. That's a quote from some great philosopher.
Like most American trainers, though, Headley supports keeping Lasix in the game to prevent horses from bleeding in the lungs. All other race day drugs should be banned, he says, and those found cheating banned as well from the game. To even the playing field, then he says everyone wins, including today for old school hay, oats, and water trainer Bruce Headley. His 7-horse first-class flyer with a Lasix injection crossing the finish line first for a cool $50,000 purse.
Winning trainer is Bruce Headley. His assistant is Karen Headley. The winning rider, Joe Calamone.
Says he's never too old to win.
Winning never gets old.
Our thanks to Mike Kirsh for that report. Earlier this year, Kentucky became the first state in the U.S. to ban Lasix in horse racing. It will apply to the Kentucky Derby in 2015. Opponents of the ban argue that prohibiting the use of Lasix will only encourage owners and trainers to relocate to other states, further decreasing racetrack revenue. That brings us to the conclusion of our broadcast. Please join us again next week for another edition of America's Now. See you then.